So thank you very much. So what I'll try to do is share with you where we are right now, what's happened and where we're heading, and what that means for you and how you can continue to help your researchers move forward. So I know I'm talking to repositories and you have your scientists. So I'm going to try to give you the content that we're using when we're talking to the research community, so that you have it as well and you can take advantage of it. Let's see. Okay. So this is usually one of the slides I kick off with because it's so fundamental to what AGU does. It's the data position statement, originally written back in the 1990s, on the value of our scientific data, especially within our domain. So many observations on terrible things that have happened, wonderful things that have happened as phenomena in our world, in our planetary system and beyond. And it is, that data is unique and valuable and helps us to see things in ways that we couldn't see before and study our Earth in ways that isn't possible without that. And this group understands that best of all. You have some of the longest standing observations that are available, and I just thank you because it is so incredibly important. Oh, thank you so much. So this is an interesting slide, and it's now a couple years old, but it still is really tells the story of our challenge. So this is the Belmont Forum. I think you all know them because they do funding within the environmental science space, but they are international. They have 29 different countries. There's a lot that they can help to influence. And they stood up this entity called the Infrastructures and Data Management Group, and just heads up, that's going to stand down this year, which I'm sad about, but hopefully they've gotten the legs going. And you'll know Rowena Davis and Bob Samwers and Fiona Murphy and others, of course, that have helped with that. And they did this survey, which really codified what we all thought was happening behind the scenes with our researchers. So this went to researchers, and what were the needs, their digital skills, their research habits that they knew they needed to improve. And would you not believe that sharing data was right at the top? There were several of these that jumped out, and this was right when we were trying to formulate the project that AGU convened called Enabling Fair Data, really a community project across the Earth, space, and environmental sciences. So that project targets some of these really challenging areas. One is encouraging sharing of data, sharing of models, and awareness, being able to get machine readable data so that researchers can find it aside from the publications. And I also highlighted here lack of well-maintained libraries and codes. Well, shoot, if you put it into a repository, it's going to be well-maintained, so let's get your data there. And then poor compliance with data management requirements. So you could read this a bunch of ways, but if you have a good relationship with your repository, you have access to some of the best standards and practices for data management. So getting researchers connected to repositories is pretty critical. So another report came out about that same time from Figshare, and they were looking at the state of open data, and I'll give you the yellow arrows right away. And this is what will motivate you as a researcher to share your data. Again, really great to see these numbers, and I probably could have put a yellow arrow in all of them as to our, the work that we were doing for enabling fair data and what we could influence. So the first one there is increased visibility on your research. If you shared your data, there are studies out there, and I will hunt down the reference if you want me to, indicating that you do get cited more if your data is available. We hit square on the journal publisher requirement, that third one there, that that's what we put into place for guidelines for journals and publishers on sharing data citation. Transparency and reuse, if it's well documented, it's easy to find, it's accessible, you have a higher probability of reuse. And the LTERs are that is your mantra. We want that data to be used and reused, and so I know that's a big goal and motivation. And then getting credit for sharing your data and credit to the data creators for reuse. Really important for encouraging folks to take the time to actually get their data preserved. So you all know this, but I'm giving you these slides in case it's valuable for any of your talks. And then in the preamble of the FAIR guidelines, FAIR guideline principles that was published in Nature just a couple years ago that we've been using as our guide, that the urgency to actually make sure the reuse of scholarly data is possible because our infrastructure really is challenged. And many folks are working towards improving that, and you guys have a lot of really good stories and methodology that you've used over the last few years to move in that direction. So it's a really good space. So as I'm talking to researchers, one of the things I try to help them understand is why do you care about FAIR? Why does it matter to you? Here, I'll give you the FAIR part. And so I talk about the fact that if they're hunting for data, it's much more valuable if there's a citation within that publication, they can get to it. If they're looking at that data and trying to get access and understand it, having the documentation, the format, if it's a format that works within their particular science domain, the tools that you use, that really matters. And that there's some sort of licensing identified for how to use that data and what's allowed, so that you know what's possible. So my point here for you as repositories is you make this happen. You help researchers with that data citation because you provide that persistent identifier. You help them make sure it's well documented because you have standards for that for your community. You help them with the formats to make sure they're interoperable, and you help them with the licensing. So this really, really matters. I think
Ellie, I just want to, there is somebody here with a phone. Could you please mute your phone? Thank you.
Thank you. Or type much more quietly. Thank you. So I made you a Hallmark card. I really went to Hallmark and I pulled down this picture, and I added things that repositories would add. And I really truly believe that every researcher should have their own repository that they're connected to, your people. So you as repositories have your researchers, and you have this connection, and you're able to actually work together and help them meet these good documentation, good persistent identifier, good connections with the publications to their data. And I have this dream that we have these new Hallmark cards that we send out to researchers that are coming through the educational pipeline and say, hello, we're your repository. Please, this is where your data goes. Come to the wine and cheese event so you can get to know us. I mean, just imagine, wouldn't that just be the coolest? So I made you a Hallmark card. There you are. I've never done this for any other talk. This is a brand new slide. I've never made a Hallmark card. It's yours. That's your Hallmark card. I hope you love it. I have made stickers though. So here's the sticker that we've been handing out, and certainly find me the next time we're together at a meeting and I'll have more. But this is the citation for the article about FAIR data, and we're just delighted to use that as a way to make a point. And hopefully in the next couple of years, FAIR will just be normal and no one's going to say FAIR data anymore. It's just going to be our data, and it's well documented, and of course it meets all these criteria because that's what it should do, right? And FAIR just falls away. That would be fantastic. And I think you guys know it pretty well. I'll just skip this. Great. Okay. So one of the things especially within our repository community, but also a lot of infrastructure, is as we get grants to build this infrastructure, we're really doing that for particular research communities and meeting those needs. So on the far left here, you've got internal IDs, community evolved standards, targeted discovery. The LTERs live that, you've had such history, you know exactly what this is. And then as we evolve so that we have interoperability and we're able to see things in a global way, you've gone through a lot of this evolution, if not all of it. in order for everything, all of your data to be backwards compatible in formats, well documented, and with common vocabulary. I know you've gone through this process. It's an incredible story. And really many are looking towards you as an example and a use case of how to do it and what the effort takes. So it's really huge. And usually I'm talking to folks that aren't as far along as you are. So it's an incredible evolutionary tale on how you support your researchers. And then, how do we make change? How do we make culture change? Well, shoot, it's super complicated. It takes all of these stakeholders and roles within the entire data ecosystem in order to make a change happen. And this is where we are with the Enabling Fair Data project. We pushed really hard with the stakeholders that participated. They were incredibly enthusiastic and are still continuing to do transition and implementation. But mostly it was the publishers, the repositories, a little tiny bit within the library community, more within, of course, the data management community. We had a lot of very eager folks there. But we haven't talked directly to researchers yet. We don't have a direct pipeline. And we really want to not do that as a project. We'd rather do that as, for instance, the connection that a researcher makes with their repository. They should work with the repository to actually resolve and determine what makes sense for your domain. That's where they really should get their support. So that's what we're encouraging. Let your researchers know that this is now in place. And continue the culture change. I'm working on more international connections, more societies. We're going to have a meeting of societies in June in order to give them steps to help their members see what the path is and encourage them to be more open and fair with their data. Okay, so here's our project webpage. This is where all of the resources are located. So jot this down, copdes.org, COPDESSO.org. You probably know Copdes. So Kirsten Leonard and Brooks Hansen are the two PIs. That entity still exists and has a cluster in ESEP, where they're just getting their feet under them for how that will look within an ESEP space. Because the funding, the Sloan and NSF funding has all been consumed. So now it's how do we move forward? And the Enabling Fair Data project is a project. It has an end date. And we've transitioned all of those activities to places like Copdes, to ESEP, to RDA, in order to keep things going and keep things updated. So watch for the ESEP cluster for new materials, hopefully by summer. Fingers crossed that we can get that organized by summer. And then the one-page document that Suzanne has for you has links to the commitment statement, the author guidelines, and the frequently asked questions, and I'll tell you more about that in just a second. So here's the elevator speech. And of course, we did a lot more than just this one slide, but this is the general gist of it. First of all, at the very bottom, we're no longer placing data in the supplement. It doesn't belong there. It's not indexed there. It's not well documented there. And the supplement's not treated at the same level of preservation as the paper itself, commonly. I'm not saying that some publishers don't do better than others. They do. But commonly, this is not an archive. That's a bad place for data. So what does that mean? It means we have to get it into a repository such as yourselves. And we need to get the publishers to put the guidelines, common guidelines in place in order to make that happen. So that's what those two bullets essentially are getting to. This list is like, I'm really excited because it means that the hammer is going in place for the guidelines across the publishers worldwide. And we're incredibly excited about that. And repositories, I have a longer list of the repositories that have signed on. And just delighted that there's quite a lot of support coming out of this community. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So right as of today, yesterday, we did get one more signature, so I guess 101. 101 signatures to date. So Nature just announced, they're the last two there, Nature and Scientific Data. That came in mid-January. Would you believe they did that while I was on vacation? And I had to, I'm like, you guys are not going to announce when I'm on vacation, are you? Yes, we are. Okay, I got it. Don't worry, I'm not going to miss this. We'll tweet that out. Thank you so much. Of course, I was delighted, right? Finally, they signed. Yay. Science and Elsevier, they've been hugely supportive. I can only say good things about the work that Elsevier did for us. And of course, Copernicus wanted to be at the top of the list. They've already implemented all of the changes necessary for their publications, and they're requiring their editors to implement. AGU, we are a society. We ourselves need to take a little bit more time. So our internal introduction and training was yesterday. And then our editor-in-chiefs meet in a couple weeks, and that will codify the implementation to follow. So we're just about there. In a couple weeks, we'll have it in place. But they know what's coming, and they've been aware of that, of course, for as long as I've been there. So anyway, it's good news all the way around. And there's other publishers that are talking to us that are getting ready to sign. They just have to do their internal politics and make sure that everything's in order. So it's good. It's continuing to grow. So this slide, this is the commitment statement bullets for researchers. And I'm drawing your attention to the blue part, because that means they need to have a good relationship with the repository. All of those things in blue, researchers can't do without their repository. So it matters. It matters that they find the right spot. So the rest of it they can take care of, but the repository, even when we ask a researcher to do something, in this case, it's because they picked the right repository. That's how important you guys are. And then here's your list. So the first bullet is an incredibly overly packed sentence. So essentially what we're talking about here is that you're providing the services that you provide. You do curation for the data, making sure that it's what matters within your domain. It's not only readable by humans, but also readable by machines. You've got landing pages, because at the moment those are standard. I know there's talk about other things in the future, but at the moment. Hello.
You there?
Hi, yes, we can hear you. Did someone have a question? Nope, okay, all right. We'll just keep moving. That you provide standard formats, that you provide, that the data is findable, it's exposed and publicly discoverable. So there's a whole bunch of elements in that first bullet. That you are promoting interoperability and reuse in the way you ingest and expose that data. We don't tell you how to do that, we just encourage you to do that. And then the next couple bullets, ensuring unique and persistent identifiers and creating associations. This is the linking. This is your ORCID to your data, to your publication. And I do see there's a question, so let me just go check on that.
I just requested for people to mute their microphones again. Sorry, Shelley.
Okay, got it. No, it's okay. I just didn't want to miss somebody. And that you're creating associations, that you have licensing identified for that data. And we're also asking for software, but we know that's more complicated. Best effort on software, but for sure on data. That if the data is not published, in other words, it's not accessible at the time the peer review process for the manuscript is taking place, that you figure out a way for those peer reviewers on the manuscript to know that the data exists. How you do that, we don't care. It can be technical, it can be an email, we really don't care. It's just that they're able to evaluate the science with the data in hand, if they choose to. And then we're recommending, it says gain, it doesn't say have, okay, notice that, it says gain, it doesn't say have, a third-party validation. So this is like a core trust seal, where you're validated for trustworthiness. And this is a way for folks that don't know how repositories work, know that you're meeting a common standard across the community. Now, we can have a long conversation if you think that's a good idea or not. And, you know, is it, you know, are you doing more than the core trust seal right now? Yes, I think actually a lot of LTERs are. But it's a great way to have a common a place to start talking about things. And so we wrote an article published within the scientific editor journal, which is the Council for Science Editors Journal. And the one-page document has this link, so I know you can't click your screen, but you can, the one page has this. We walk through all of the different things an author needs to know. And remember, it's all about the relationship with the repository. So the fact that we're saying author guidelines really should say, making relationships with your repository, ... and data citation. So it really matters to you that we're pushing authors to you, just so you know. And these are pictures from our most recent stakeholder meeting where we were talking about that. Just very quickly, these author guidelines, first of all, find a fair aligned repository. So not everyone will meet every single piece of what we're asking for in the commitment statement, but what we want to make sure is that you're moving towards that as best you can. The closer you get, the better. That the author is citing and linking their data, and we give examples. We do love the ESES guidelines for Earth and Space Science examples, so we provide that link. The handout also has the new link to the software citation, and in case you want to check out that, the ESES guidelines for software citation. And then, of course, the data availability statement. So the first bullet and the last bullet here are kind of juxtaposition. We want unrestricted access, the accessibility, the A, for the data that underlies the research. But we realize there could be constraints. So the restrictions are there in the bottom. Fossil locations, personally identifiable information, health information, commercial data could have NDAs. There's a lot of different ways that you can get a restriction that's perfectly reasonable within our science space, but we just have to make sure we do our very best to be as open as possible and closed as necessary. And then we built this tool. So the middle one is the tool, Identifying Fair Aligned Repositories, and I'm going to talk about that next. Look at that. I remember the next slide. Okay, so this tool, you guys are experts. I'm just going to give you the skinny. This tool is wonderful, but it's also challenging because we had to use the metadata that existed, not necessarily what aligned exactly to the commitment statement. So it does a pretty good job, and it would be, we're hoping that we'll be able to encourage continued development so it can continue to evolve and improve. Okay, so when you get to the repository finder tool, and I want you to do this because I want your repositories to show up. So your job is to make sure they show up for your researchers or the ones that should come to you, and that you're adjusting your metadata as needed. And there's actually a guideline for best ways to, I forgot to give that to you guys. Suzanne, I'll give you the link I have for best practices on this to adjust that metadata.
That's good, yeah.
Yep, I forgot about that. So you get to this, and you want to pick the bottom link. So see repositories in RE3 data that meet the criteria for enabling fair data. It would be really great if this was just see the, your trusted repositories, and we didn't go into all these words, which are super confusing. So, tell your researchers, don't get confused, just pick the bottom thing. And then you get this list. At the time I took the screenshot, there was 187 repositories within the Earth, Space, and Environmental Sciences worldwide that met the minimal criteria for what we were looking for. And it is minimal. This is not a strict down select list. It's a pretty loose one. And if you click on the right where it says Enabling Fair Data Project, you get this next screen. Do you see the funky, I don't know if you can see the funky button where the arrow is? That opens up these down select criteria. So first of all, it's Earth, Space, and Environmental repositories. And then it's any kind of open. We take anything. Open on Sundays, fine, we'll take it, right? Any kind of open, that's a joke, hope you're laughing. And then any kind of persistent identifier. So obviously that doesn't hit everything that we had in the commitment statement, but it's pretty good. And this was based on the metadata that exists. Something else to point out here. For you taxonomy geeks, This does not do institutional repositories a lot of good. Because their taxonomy is really broad, they usually label themselves like natural sciences and don't get down to the geosciences level. And so they actually don't get selected. That doesn't mean they don't comply. It's a real frustration right now, and we are fully aware of their frustration. How to solve it is not yet clear. But if you're associated with an institutional repository, please just don't let them get too frustrated, or have them just pop in one of the geotaxonomies into their RE3 data profile. They'll, purists will hate that, but just that'll get around the problem. Then you'll be selected. Yes, I know. We can talk about it over a glass of wine. I'm sorry. Then we have an example of one repository that's got Core Trust Seal certification. This little red dot will show up for any certification, but right now Core Trust Seal is the one that's being encouraged. I won't say perfect, but it's being encouraged. And there are not many repositories that have it. So it's not something that's required right now, but it's something that is encouraged. The National Geoscience Data Center does have it, so we could use them as an example to show you what that looks like. Because you are who you are, just because someone shows up in the list doesn't mean they're a perfect match. You need, as a researcher, to reach out to them and make sure your data can be taken. There's a lot of other issues with funding, and I'm sure you can give me the what to and where for and the millions of reasons why certain data can't go in certain places. You know that really well, and we're encouraging researchers to actually contact that repository before they start pushing their data in. Okay, frequently asked questions. So this is another really special moment. We got 300 stakeholders to agree on a commitment statement, which is really hard. And then even harder, we got everyone to agree on how to answer questions. That's super hard, but we did it. So I recommend, and it's this first version, please go here and read through them. And if you have an improvement that makes sense to your researchers, that you could really use some language in here to clarify, and I already have folks clarifying. The space weather folks could really use some better language in here, so we're working with them. And you probably have folks that would like to improve things as well. We will update this document. We're not going to touch the commitment statement, but we will update this document. There's also questions that we could not come to a consensus on for the answers, so we'll have those back out for review and start working on drilling down on those answers and see if we can get to consensus. So there'll be hopefully a summer meeting topic at ESEP on this, and then of course it will be international, so everyone will get a chance to jump in. All right, and if you have not heard, we did put together a cohort for Core Trust Seal. So ESES is Earth and Space and Environmental Sciences. Don't you love it? And we did get through our initial webinars, but they're recorded and easy to get to. They're not in the one page. So Suzanne, I think you've got these slides and you can share these links. It is not too late. It is absolutely not too late. We have enough money within the project for enabling fair data to pay for 25 repositories to submit their packages. So it's normally €1,000, but because we're a cohort, they gave us a discount and it's only €750. So we have enough money to cover 25 of those. That money is good for 3 years. So if you are at all interested or think you will be next year or maybe really soon after that, please let Rebecca know, and so she can put you on the list of folks that will go through this process likely in the next amount of time. If you don't end up going through the process, there's nothing that happens. Nobody sends you anything. No one calls and tells you they're disappointed. Nothing happens. But this is a neat opportunity to do it as a group. And there are folks that are talking to each other to make sure they do it as easily and efficiently as possible. So it's a great, if you're thinking about it, do it. There you go. And I think you know Rebecca Koskela. She's wonderful. Okay. This is just an image from their screen. I'm hoping those numbers changed. I did take this image a while ago. These are the things that are on that one-page reference that Suzanne has. I think I've talked about everything, so I'll just skip over this and go on. So now that we have February, this month, right now, the 19th, let's see, 10 more days, 9 days. 9 days left on the Enabling Fair Data project. 9 days, that's it. Then it is complete. And the entities that are taking over each of the elements have already picked them up and will move forward. So you'll still hear about it, but the official project ends in 9 days. I can't believe it. It's been quite a marathon within a sprint. And the really fantastic news is we are seeing folks that have benefited from this work winning grants within the National Science Foundation and other funders working towards interoperability, reusability, the pieces that this project didn't really dig in on. And I am excited to hear about that and support those efforts. So please let me know if there's anything we can do. AGU or whoever would be helpful, CopDesk or anything. But there is one news to share with you, and that is I'm a PI on a grant win from the Belmont Forum that actually involves a lot of your peers. Margaret O'Brien in specific is on the US team for this project. And I'll give you all of the names in case you want to, I don't know, ask them something and thank them for doing this. I don't know. This was an incredibly difficult proposal. 6 countries, and 4 of which have funding, 2 do not. And over 200 types of data, socioeconomic data having to do with protected environments. So we're really excited. We don't all have our funding yet, so it's really hard to talk about details and confirm everything, but I can tell you a little bit. The acronym is called PARSEC. We put the name into a tool, and this is what came up, guys. This is how that got picked. It was really hard to come up with an acronym, but it's easy to say, so that works. This is the one page. No one's seen this. You're the first ones to see this. We were trying to figure out how to do a one page on a really complicated idea. So essentially, let me spell it out for you. And it would be great to be engaged with this group on this project. Especially on my data side and also on the synthesis science side. So we have 4 PIs. Nicolas Moquette is out of France, funded through ANR, and David Mouliot is the PI for the synthesis science side. Alison Specht is the submitting author. She and I teamed to actually write the proposal. So she and I did the writing. And she's in Australia, and I am the PI for the data strand. So the objectives are, they hit on so much that you're working on. And so think about the Enabling Fair Data project. Think about the opportunity to impact or work with researchers to do better data management at the moment they're actually doing it. So like listening and advising, like being a consultant. That piece is in here, as well as building out the infrastructure for automated attribution and credit. Making sure ORCIDs are available, making sure the links are in place. Much of that, what we learned coming out of Enabling Fair Data, was not happening. Publishers weren't creating data citations right. Data citations weren't making it into the linking systems between Crossref and DataCite and all of the other linking systems. Very uncommonly did you actually have an ORCID associated with a data set. So we have a lot of outreach associated with this. And a new tool coming from DataCite, building on the Make Data Count project for researchers to actually see where their data is, no matter which repository it's in, and then get some information about its usage and reusage. we're really excited about that because that doesn't really exist anywhere. Some repositories, like Data One, provides information like that, but it's not federated across all of the repositories. And that's what we're trying to do, is give a common place where that will be. So these work package 5 for the data science strand is a lot of the outreach. Work package 6 is the tools that I was talking about for DataCite. And then, of course, telling everyone is common to both strands. Work package 4 is common for everybody. Then David Milieu will be working with different socio-ecological systems for no new data. This is all reused data. It's the rule. No new data, all existing data. Let's see, this is over 4 years. And I think you can, so the US has 425 euros, which equates to about $500,000. I think you can, in your mind, imagine by the time you spread that across 4 years, it won't go too far. And we are looking for more opportunity to add smaller amounts of money to this pot in order to have as much robustness as possible. So if you see value here in what you're doing, in this kind of a participation, especially on the science side, please do reach out. And what we'd really like to do is try to come up with a way to find money to add on other projects that could benefit from this work. Okay, yay. This XXX, by the way, is just because nobody could remember what the number was. Brazil compensates with the salaries for their scientists, and that's what that is. The 84 is travel. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, here's our US team members. Jamie Trammell and Robin Kasdon, David Kramer, and then we have an opening for an intern, not to start this first year, but to begin, I think next year. I'll double check that. And then myself and Margaret are in the data science strand. And then we have synthesis science and data science folks in all of the countries. So it's a much larger team in general, but this is the US members. There. Hopefully that was exciting.
Thank you very much, Shelley. It was exciting and interesting, and thank you also for all the work you and your team have done. So as EDI, my colleagues.
Yes, Mark Sevilla, definitely. Let me see who else is on. Mark is our co-chair for one of our working groups. Kristen Vanderbilt at our data fair for AGU fall meeting helped to organize the workshops, which included a lot of enabling fair data activity and the data help desk for the fall meeting, and also at ESA. I think she participated in ESA as well. So am I forgetting anybody? But yeah, it was huge, just huge. Yeah.
So there are, now we can go to questions, and there are 2 from Kat. And one is how this effort you are doing with the Fair Data Project relates to government databases like SurfCat or data.gov or any more websites.
It does apply, especially the enabling fair data part. So USGS is the only federal government entity that signed on to the project. And I think that's because we work really closely with Vip Hutchinson in order to get the voice of USGS. They're really very innovative in with CDI. And I was just trying to remember what CDI stood for. Data integration, shoot. I'm sorry, forgive me, Leslie. I can't believe I can't remember. Anyway, really important work that they're doing, and they allow others to come in and participate. So she knew that USGS had already made the decisions ahead of the project. And the moment we put out the commitment statement for signatures, thank you, Rebecca, Community for Data Integration, thank you. Since this is being recorded, I'm sorry, Leslie. So science-based, being able to have outward-facing data. Science-based is actually their solution to meet the PAR requirements as well. So all of our government databases have those requirements from the public accessibility, the Holder memo from 2013, for the commitment statement, I've had. one-on-one conversations with both NOAA and NASA. NOAA believes that they are fully compliant, and we talked through all of their challenges. The one thing about their persistent identifiers is they assign them when requested. So this is something for everyone to know in case you have a researcher that's a little frustrated. You can request a DOI of the data that you're using so that you can actually reference it and cite it. It's an extra step that NOAA has in place just because their volume of data is so huge, and they're not going to necessarily go back and assign DOIs to what size, which piece would you like a DOI for? Really hard. So I understand why they did that. And then NASA, the last time I spoke to the folks at the DACs, the only thing that they needed to work on was their data licensing. They are public about software licensing, but not public about data licensing. And they were going to go back and try to work on that. But mostly they were fully compliant. Now, could they sign? Probably. Would they sign? The number of red tape they'd have to go through to sign a commitment statement? Probably not. But I'm okay with that they're working towards it and that we can talk about that. We'll get there. We'll get there. Eventually they'll be ready to, and they'll be, oh, that's old hat. We do that. Yeah, okay. All right, good. I don't care. Just do it. If you're not a signatory, it doesn't matter. Just do it. But please be a signatory. When did Parsec start? We were awarded, it was right after Christmas is when we found out. And then we're still waiting on funding. So the actual start date it didn't happen yet. And we have to coordinate 4 countries, and they're all delayed for different reasons in their government. Just imagine. So in our minds, we're really crossing our fingers for July. I hope we can make it by July. Our schedule has us starting January 2nd, in case you can understand our frustration. And it will go for 4 years. I don't know if they'll let us extend the end to go for another half year beyond. I hope they do. But there's a lot of, for instance, I've already put in a co-located meeting at RDA coming up this April in Philadelphia to introduce the project. So if you're coming to RDA, please come and I will walk you through the project so you can see what it's all about and do what I did for you guys, but bigger. There's also a splinter at EGU in Vienna following RDA. So we'll roll it again internationally and try to get interest and see if there's a way to benefit other groups who have data that might be part of this. Okay. Rebecca. Oh, thank you. And then Marianne. Core Trust Seal looks for a persistent identifier registration process. It doesn't necessarily say it has to be a digital object identifier. But let's say that's a good idea because they do provide a lot more services than some of the other persistent identifiers. I would recommend you get that registration process in place because it will be needed for Core Trust Seal. But I love that you're asking these questions. So you should look at our videos. They walk you through what it is and 3 different use cases for how people approached getting Core Trust Seal. They're really fantastic. So the first 2 speakers are Rory Edmonds and John Fondine from USGS, the EROS repository archive. And he really thought through this. And he and I actually had some early conversations, but then he went off like gangbusters. And then the other 2 speakers are Ingrid Dillow, who was really early adopter in DONS and also helped to architect Core Trust Seal and its predecessor, Data Seal of Approval. So hearing the way she approached it is really interesting. She's very analytical. And then Helen Glaves, who brought in the UK's National Geoscience, and I forget what the other 2 letters stand for. They're one of the first repositories within the geosciences to actually get Core Trust Seal certified as well. And so watch them, and that should give you a really good idea on what to think through as you're preparing.
I have a Oh, Mariana has another question.
Oh, the Parsec project, it doesn't actually have an element for core trust seal certification in it. So the 500,000 is part of Parsec. There'll be two primary goals. One of them will be credit, the infrastructure necessary for credit, and trying to do outreach to help people realize, like for instance, the repository is the authoritative source for the data that supports our science. You know, as long as you agree with me on that statement, which I think you will, or do, then you really should, oh, hello, Marianne. I hear you now. What you really should do is make sure you have the ORCID of the author, the creator of that data, so that the ORCID file can represent the data set that was created through a relationship. How that relationship works, there's a couple different ways. I know that DataSite can be a conduit to update ORCID, and you can also have a relationship directly with ORCID. So this project will codify that and give you the best recommendations, and then do a lot of outreach to repositories to make sure they capture ORCIDs along. So automated attribution and credit means you've got the ORCID, you've got the linkage, and you're able to make the value of that new research product visible by others, including institutions, for the contributions those data creators are making to science. And that's when the fireworks go off and everything's fantastic, right? Let's hope we can do that. Yeah.
Does this answer your question, Marianne?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is how you view the future of repositories. Do you think the landscape will be more distributed? You know, that there are many field-specific repositories, or do you think there will be a more centralized approach because it's kind of difficult to maintain the technology and infrastructure?
I cannot see the future. So that is a fact. I have a very heavy IT background. Mm-hmm. I've seen the benefit of efficiencies with common platforms. It makes it easier on, you know, if you've got one systems administrator or systems integrator that can take care of the base platform, that's great. Okay, that being said, there's not very many people in the repository community that understands how relationships with researchers work. You're not a cold dump for data. You are not. You are a rich environment of support and communication for researchers. Mm-hmm. This has to maintain. It has to grow. It doesn't scale well. You can't, much of it, some can be automated, some, right? I mean, the Data One's done some amazing things with automation. Matt Jones is brilliant. And if the more we can do automation, the better. But there's new science. There's new types of data integration that happens. There's new things we have to do to help our scientists with, and that takes people and the skill sets to work with people. And that can't be standardized. That is unique. So if we can keep that going, there is, in other work I do, the sustainable funding for repositories is a big deal. So I'm on Margaret's a work group for ESEP for sustainable repositories ROIs, because I want that to succeed. I really want that message to go back to funders and say, you have to help here. You're not doing, it's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. I'm really careful about my words because they are doing a lot, but we just need a better solution that's easier to plan on. So many repositories are only funded for a couple years or less, and the value of their holdings and how they work with researchers is not seen. we need to tell that story. That story needs to come out in big ways. So at fall meeting, we did a union session. It has a wonky name. The name doesn't, and I can give you the link to the recording. Maybe that would be the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
But Margaret McNutt was our moderator, and we had international groups. So it was a great debate. So we had the folks from Japan, Moriyama-san was there. Folks from the UK were there representing what's happening with Horizon 2020, and some of our high-level folks here in the US. And it was in this space that we're in science, how do we do science better? And a huge piece of that conversation was the repository. You are holding the scientific record, the data. You have the longitudinal studies. You have the data that would be used for science that hasn't even been thought of yet. You're critical. So what does it mean? And that's still early thinking worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? And we need to solve it. So I guess what I'm saying is we were trying to encourage this conversation to keep going.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah. And my second question is, what does it mean for a publisher to change their system to allow, to implement the guidelines? Is it a big chunk of work, or
it is? It
Mm-hmm.
is. But I will tell you, being an IT person, but not a publisher. So I didn't even know AGU systems. I had to do a lot of work to figure out how it all went together. And in my mind, it was different. I had it different, where it would be more automated. And once, and it actually wasn't an AGU person that showed this to me. It was actually somebody from a different editor's tool who sat me down and said, okay, this is how it actually works. And it's one of the more common ingest processes. And my mouth is hanging open. I'm like, you're kidding me. This is not what I imagined at all.
Mm-hmm.
However, here's what the truth is. So usually a publication is submitted as a PDF, and it's not even a rich PDF. The citations are embedded within the PDF. They're not active. You've lost a lot of content that's stored on the repository that tells you about this data down to these very minimal elements in a citation. But the good news is there better be a DOI or some link to the repository that's similar, and that's how you reestablish that connection. And that happens down the process within publication. In the very end, when there's a format that goes to receiving systems like Chorus and most importantly Crossref, where they receive the critical elements of a publication. It's called the front matter. The author, not even the references are there. I'm sorry, yes, the references are there. Not the entire paper necessarily is part of this process, but the references are there, including the data citations. But right now, that link between the publisher and Crossref doesn't necessarily identify the data citation correctly because no one asked them to. Mm-hmm. The format is there, the schema is there, but no one asked the publishers to fix that identification that it's data and not something else, or not identify it at all. So a lot of citations that exist aren't identified as data. Now there's a back-end fix. If you're a DOI, Crossref fixes it by looking at the DOI registry and re-identifying the references data. If you're any other persistent identifier, that does not happen. So this is what we're asking them to do. Fix that. There is a way to fix it. They just have to fix it. So they're working on that right now. I think Wiley's finished. I know Nature's finished. I have to check on the others. But the stats that come from the Make Data Count collection, the numbers, mm-hmm. should spike. We should see a big spike once the publishers fix what they're doing. And then also the guidance, the common guidance, the author guidelines for the citation and not the supplement. So put the data in a repository, not the supplement, and that should spike. our data citations, and I'm giddy. I can't wait to see the numbers change. And folks are working really hard to do that. So go.
Yeah.
Working. So yes, they had a heavy lift. And mostly they were willing to do it, which I'm delighted.
Yeah. Are there any other, we are coming close to, maybe we are even beyond 3 o'clock Eastern, but are there any other questions? I could ask many more, but I hope that we might meet at some meeting soon.
Well, they're coming out of the Enabling Fair Data Project, our second stakeholder meeting. We had a whole bunch of identified initiatives to keep the culture change moving forward. And Mark was part of that meeting. I'm trying to think if there were other folks that were part of that meeting. But I haven't yet synthesized all of that. Where the steering committee has been meeting almost every 2 weeks this year in order to try to think through what that would look like. Some things make sense for AGU to help with, especially on the society side, not so much the publisher side, but the society side. And some things make sense for other folks to work on because it's not something that AGU is an expert on, but could help convene a meeting or something like that. So we're trying to figure out who's doing what. And then there are other people making progress on some of these initiatives and just encouraging that to happen and highlighting it and bringing, just like you're doing here in these meetings. So bring awareness to activity that's in line with everything and should be supported. So we'll try to connect the dots there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other sciences. I'm going to a chemistry meeting.
Actually, that was one of my questions I held back because of time constraints, but how other fields of research?
They're active and thinking. So I'm going to the IUPAC next workshop. That's going to be down in Orlando at the end of March. They're really moving forward. They've been working on FAIR for a while now, and they're just interested in talking through ideas. The NIH is actually, you'll appreciate this. They very quickly realized the difference between a trusted repository and FAIR data. That really the investment for repositories is in that concept of trust, which I know is like, what is that? But if you think core trust seal, that's kind of where they are. Mm-hmm. That concept of FAIR will eventually fall off because we'll have met it. We'll have good documentation. We'll have changed the culture, and it won't be a big deal anymore because we'll just be doing it. And I was really impressed that they had gotten to that so quickly. Like, all right. So they have a workshop in this month, March. They have a workshop in March to start working through those. What does that mean? USGS, the CDI folks are working on a proposal for a roadmap for USGS for FAIR data, and they're grappling with the concept of trusted versus FAIR. So our repository, how they support and all of those elements, and then the data itself and what that looks like. And I just got invited to be a partner. They just submitted last week, Canada, doing an international effort with socioeconomic data that connects to other kinds of data. So that will be really interesting to see that evolve as well. And that's connected with the Force 11 folks. Mm-hmm. So it's
spreading into other fields, yeah.
Yep. So that meeting of societies will be more than just geo-societies. We're going to bring in compute folks and chemistry folks to give them a format to talk and participate. Mm-hmm. So, if you have a favorite society you want us to invite, let me know, because I didn't send invitations out yet. I can change the list.
No, mine is AGU, sorry.
Okay. They're good.
Yeah, good, mine. Okay, one last quick question, if there is one, please ask. And if not, then thank you very, very much, Shelley, for this interesting and informative webinar.
Thank you. This has been a delight. I appreciate talking to your community. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, Shelley. It was great hearing you again.
Bye, Mark. Good to hear your voice, too.
Bye-bye.